What's the family's reaction to hearing prosecutors are now poised to pursue the death penalty?
The family's reaction is torn. It's a torn reaction. They are very upset to hear the extreme details that were released today, but at the same time, they want justice for Melinda. So they're torn between supporting their sister and dealing with their father.
And could you describe when the last time they saw Melinda was, and did they tell you what kind of state she was in from what they observed?
Many of all our clients have not seen her for quite some time. One of the sisters did see her, I believe it was the end of 2022, but she was in bed covered and was not permitted to remove her covering. So they did not see her body or physical appearance at all.
Speaking with the Inquirer, Emily, one of her sisters, mentioned that she grew worried about her condition and potential abuse from the moment that her father started dating Miss Warren. Is that something they told you, and what was it about their relationship or her history that made her get worried about her sister?
I can speak for Emily. She was very concerned about Cindy Warren's participation in Melinda's life, given her history. As all of you know, and it's readily available, she was convicted of child abuse in the past and served a prison sentence for such. So Miss Emily Lee Googled that and found that information out when her father began dating Cindy, and therefore she was very concerned about Melinda's well-being around Cindy Warren.
So the efforts now going forward, trying to short circuit something like what happened here happening to somebody else, right? A creation of a database that looks similar to the Megan's Law Registry. Is that sort of where you want, if you could describe for us?
Yeah, I mean, I think that would help, but the bottom line is that this was completely preventable. There were numerous junctures in time where a number of governmental agencies and authorities were aware of Cindy Warren, aware of her involvement in this child's life. CYS was aware, they were notified, and based on the information that we have now, there were a total of 0 visits to the home by CYS. 0 visits to the home, despite knowing of this prior conviction. There was a court order that said in black and white that Cindy Warren is not to be around Malinda Hoagland for a certain amount of time, which was completely disregarded. And if any Joe Schmo on the street can Google and figure this out, then the agencies responsible for the welfare of children in this Commonwealth must have seen that and were required to do something. And we now know that this child was ripped out of school with rug burns that couldn't be concealed with makeup, was chained, tortured, emaciated like folks who are confined to prison or inhumane camps that we only read about in history books. So the notion that this was not obvious to adults and should have been stopped is laughable, with all due respect. And although we are happy that the death penalty is being pursued and that the criminal case is being prosecuted, these folks were only allowed to be in this environment with this child only after repeated failures by the very people who are responsible for the welfare of our children, CYS and the schools.
So what role will you two play moving forward in representing this family?
So we're right now turning over every single stone that we can to find out in this gruesome timeline everything that happened, everything that was reported. We already know from the district attorney's own probable cause affidavit, this was reported. So this is not a situation of oopsie daisy or oops. This is what a darn shame. This is, they had knowledge. They knew the child was in the home with this individual who had a record in black and white. And the child was displaying both physical and psychological signs of abuse. So we will find out every single thing that happened to her, and we will hold responsible every single person in the civil justice system. Unfortunately, you can't put folks in jail in civil cases because that's not what we do. But there are things that can be done to punish and deter this kind of behavior from corporations and from government agencies, and we will pursue that to the fullest.
What kind of counts in the lawsuit? Negligence, variety of claims?
Certainly negligence, but beyond that, Melinda was deprived of her constitutional rights. Civil rights claims will be brought for the torture, and we all have rights in this country to the most basic necessities, especially children, food and water. And the fact that this little girl was begging and grateful for things such as a cafeteria meal and writing in her journal that their favorite thing was food is really, really disturbing, because those are things that any kid shouldn't even be thinking about. So there will be civil rights claims, there will be negligence. We will pursue punitive damages, which are damages not to compensate the family, but rather to punish these entities, these governmental agencies, punish them, and to deter the behavior from happening again in the future.
And I just want to make clear that the civil liability will not only be a monetary liability. Tom and I are pushing for change and reform under Pennsylvania law. This is what our clients want. The sisters of Malinda Hoagland, they don't want the money. They want change. They want some kind of system. They want children and youth to be held accountable. They want children and youth to talk to each other. And they want this to not happen to any other child in the state of Pennsylvania or really anywhere. So as part of our civil suit, we'll be demanding change and reform under the law.
And I've already reached out to the governor personally, and we've asked to speak with him. We've asked him to call upon the legislature to pass these laws. I've spoken with his chief of staff. Regrettably, he hasn't made himself available to speak with us directly, but that's been requested, and I think that this should be on the top of his list.
Going off of your intention to prompt reform per the sisters, Melinda's family's request, specifically, do you anticipate, along with Rendell Hoagland and Cindy Warren, do you anticipate naming specifically the lawsuit?
I don't want to say for sure yet, but I can tell you right now that CYS will be named as a defendant. To say that they failed Melinda would be an understatement. They did not fail her. They were aware of a situation that she was in a horrific environment. They knew about the environment. They knew about Cindy Warren, and they never even bothered to head on over to the home. So we have agencies in place in this country for a reason. They exist for this very reason. This is one of the most atrocious cases of child abuse I've ever set my eyes on, having clerked for a federal judge who did criminal cases. This is unspeakable. So CYS, we will look into the schools. I mean, she was ripped out of school, put back into private school, missing weeks on end. There's documentation that the schools never got medical confirmation from the doctors, that essentially Rendell and Cindy were telling them one thing and not backing it up. Are schools responsible to parent children? No. Are schools responsible to sound the alarm when there's red flags? Yes. And they failed over and over and over again. And I think that the medical evidence, if you think about this common sense wise, you have a 12-year-old who's 50 pounds. It doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen in weeks. It happens in months.
And I think the biggest thing we need to find out with the school is, was her video camera on, right? So she's in cyber school, and the big question here is, and this may be in the affidavit that we haven't had a chance to read yet, the newer affidavit, but was the camera on, right? So if you have a 12-year-old girl that's 50 pounds, is someone seeing this? Is she answering questions? Is she participating? Is she signing on? What is she doing, right? That's going to be a big question that Tom and I will have to uncover in the upcoming months.
And the DA continued to say she was reprogrammed to accept this abuse in part of her life. It was unlikely that she would come forward, or that there were people, who were checking in on her. What's your response to that?
I think he's right that she was reprogrammed. I think that when you're a child, you have that natural love and affinity for your parents. You want to believe that, and so I don't doubt she was reprogrammed, but that's a separate issue and a separate question from the adults in her life. The schools, CYS, these are people who are trained, specially trained to detect and deal with things like this, right? So just because Melinda was programmed, that's something any professional in the social work world or psychology or schools would know about child abuse, that many times with severe abuse, a child is going to be reprogrammed. They are going to be trained to keep silent. That's like LeBron James knowing that if he dribbles and picks the ball up and dribbles it again, that's called a double dribble. So yes, it's true. Well, maybe not LeBron, because they probably wouldn't call it on him. But that is how much of a simple fact that is, that although the DA is correct about that, that doesn't relieve the schools and the government agencies of the responsibility here to look at a child who's starved, see a child who has rug burns on their face, bruising, missing lots of school with the alleged absences being medical, no medical proof. CYS calling, school calling, where's CYS? In their office, not at the home of the child. So it's not rocket science, and certainly the child was reprogrammed, but little kids rely on us as members of society to protect them when they can't protect themselves.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.